2016, and this forces the 2016 election forces us to confront the very different reality that information operations, influence operations, the idea that the most valuable target might not be the computers, but the human users. And adversaries realize here that maybe they don't need to break into computers, maybe they just need to manipulate the cognition of the person behind the screen. Today, there are many cyber attacks that still go on, they're very important and so on, but influence operations, there's activities that target human minds are often easier and more effective. These operations exploit inherent cognitive vulnerabilities and biases that we have, heuristic shortcuts that we make and so on. Vulnerabilities that no software patch can ever be downloaded into your head. You have those vulnerabilities, you have them, I have them, we all have them, and how to deal with that. And of course, today, AI amplifies this threat a lot, right? It used to be a manual operation in sort of crude techniques. Now AI enables you to exploit human minds at scale. And this is a very different kind of environment where you can customize disinformation in ways that specifically target human vulnerabilities of you, and it's different from you, and it's different from me, and so on. So in this environment, targeting, being able to trust information, trusting information, that's a liability, right? How do I trust information? How do I know it's true? And so this is the problem that we're faced with. What does it mean to build resilience in this environment, where manipulation of information is a defining characteristic, not just an incidental one, but it's really a defining characteristic. And I suggest that resilience can't mean a truth filter that censors content, and that's not sustainable. It's also not stable against shifting political winds. Imagine if the present administration were able to help define truth. No doubt that this would be an interesting world. We need an information ecosystem that makes it easier to make good decisions and harder to make bad decisions about information. In some sense, cognitive friction is a useful sort of thing to have. You want to force users to be able to pause and to think and to verify information before sharing it. You need robust information provenance tools. You need privacy-preserving algorithms that limit hyper-personalized targeting and so on. You need AI that helps people find the information they need, not just the information they say they want. Education is vital too, that you have to equip citizens with the skills to identify misleading claims. Yes, that's really important. But we've also failed to instill the desire to use those skills, to use those tools. The most critical component of resilience, really, from my standpoint, is reducing the demand for misinformation. People often prefer receiving untrue information that bolsters their political identity over true information that challenges it. And for me, from my perspective, changing this state of affairs, reducing the demand for bullshit, is sort of the challenge of our time. Cognitive resilience is multifactorial. There's going to be technology in it, but there's psychology, economics, law, regulation, and so on. We largely know what to do. Okay? The hard part is actually doing it. Okay? We have to accept that the information environment is always going to be uncertain. We have to acknowledge that leaders have cognitive biases, no matter what party you're from. Cognitive blind spots, and there are institutional procedures designed to insulate against them. Okay? And we have to follow the processes even under pressure. Okay? And probably the most important thing of all this, you have to refrain from empowering leaders who show contempt for the guardrails that are designed to protect the country. And so I suggest that in addition to all of the technology and all of the economics and psychology and so on, resilience is also political. And I've tried over the years to try to find a formulation of resilience that's not political, and I failed. if you can come up with one, I'd love to hear it. But there's an essential component of the book. Thank you.
Great. I think a lot of what you're looking for, what you're talking about is usually in dialogue, we don't understand the way people make decisions very well, and we design things for humans that don't exist. And we need to sort of put that notion that there's these biases and weaknesses in the way we think into even technical specifications so that we can minimize that sort of stuff without the damage caused by it. Cynthia, he was mentioning that we need to motivate people to use these tools, and you're leading a lot of the MIT education around AI. You want to tell us what your thoughts on this are?
Yeah, so a lot of the work that I'm doing is actually on K-12 education. So starting young, I think you can't start too early these days. We know that children are starting to, well, they already are interacting with technologies that have AI embedded in it. And you know, there's a lot of reports showing that children are adopting AI technologies as rapidly as social media. And unfortunately, they're not receiving much guidance from their teachers or parents yet. And so we are trying to develop a lot of educational materials, teacher training materials, innovative tools and technologies that help basically prepare children to be able to be aware of these kinds of tools and technologies, both to empower them, but also to help them appreciate the importance of agency, of the cognitive friction that's important in learning, trying to develop the tools and technologies to be able to bring awareness to hidden incentives and things like LLMs. These are, I mean, it's all early days, but I think the more awareness young people have, the more we have tools that reveal these biases, reveal these kinds of, again, incentives that, you know, help people think critically about these sorts of things is really important. But there are a lot of commercial influences out there that, you know, our children, unfortunately, often, even though they're not explicitly targeted, get swept up in it. And again, I think we can't, you know, we have to prepare our children from a very young age now to prepare them for this. Yeah.
So that, I think, is a really parallel problem for the society.
Yeah.
And the evolution, at least when I look at the research and things out there, I see that there's all these sort of hidden assumptions in the way we think about things. So for instance, in social media, it's supposed to be everybody's having an opinion, right? But the commercial interests make it, and some people's voice is much, much louder, and the dynamic for making money is you get louder yet. And so that drowns out the discussion that is at the heart of much of this rational decision making, and then what do we do about that? Nasli, you're next on the list. Do you want to introduce yourself and say a few words?
Yeah. I hope you can hear me.
Come up here.
Okay, so how you
You can stand here or you can sit here.
I can sit there.
Okay.
I will stand there. Something.
Something.
Yeah, okay, so I'm Nancy Shukri, I'm on the faculty at MIT, and I've been there in the same office for 56 years. So I know every piece of that structure. I would like to change a little bit the discussion, step back for a moment and bring it up to take into account some things that are rather important, and that has to do with can we now please take into account the conditions that would make it possible for the AI technology, broadly defined, to become sustainable, and we don't have to worry about supply chain, and we don't have to worry about the various bits and pieces that are essential to make possible the conversations that we're now having. So with that, I'd like to introduce the word sustainability in two contexts. One, and I'll be very brief. One is the sustainability of the AI experience, given the properties that are required to make that happen. And the other side of this is the uses of AI for purposes of sustainability, which has been implied much earlier by previous speakers. So I just want to draw your attention to three sets of inputs, call them inputs, call them part of the supply chain, call them whatever you want, but sooner or later, we're going to have to think seriously about all three. Sustaining access at reasonable costs to energy use. That goes without saying. And even the press has come up with some interest in data centers, where they're located in urban areas, acceleration of uses of energy and demands for energy descriptively. But it's something that we should keep in mind for the longer run, meaning a few years from now, especially in cases where there might be a trade-off between making energy available in for data centers, cooling, etc., in areas where the communities rely on underground water, which then becomes pressed on, too much pressure on it, and the data centers or the supply chain works well, but the failures of sustainability within the community itself. We've seen this in areas, particularly in industrializing areas, where states, communities, countries are moving very rapidly in the AI domain, and by necessity have to put pressures on underwater resources. My sense is that some attention to this with sustainability lenses might be helpful to managing such trade-offs. The second feature I'd like to draw your attention to, which is also the press has gotten forward, is rare earths. Now, I did not know what the cluster was. And most of what I do is geopolitical analysis and understanding where futures might arise. And I can guess and anticipate the political tensions that may arise when rare earths become either the tradability of rare earths become a little bit more uncertain, or whether it is attribution of uncertainty in the trading market is given to them. I'm not worried yet, but I suspect that it's well worth being a little careful about the sources, whether we can guarantee the sustainability of it. And my last one, which I'm sure you can predict, is on the manufacturing side, which is the chips. And I'm not trying to argue that we have going through problems. I am trying to argue that perhaps we should give some attention to what makes this conversation possible, which is the responsible, intelligent, creative uses of AI have to be maintained, sustained, and rendered with some degree of security, so that we don't have to worry about that infrastructure. And that's about what I have to say. I know it's not on your agenda, but I wanted to put it in there.
No, I think that's a really
because it's
good
somewhat
thing.
relevant.
I had lunch with Jensen Wang, who runs NVIDIA, and I asked him, well, you've seen AI on these little phone things. That's a really different energy economy, right? The battery, very efficient chips, and he avoided the question. So, yeah, to keep the stock price up. So I think we should think a little bit ahead and think about what is the dynamic of chip design and use. And I think that's really where it's going. It's going to be small packages. It'll be data centers. Okay, amusing fact. Do you know where about half of the data centers in the world are? What they're being used for? Mining Bitcoin. Seriously. It's like 100 terawatts a year are used for Bitcoin. Anyway, so
not the color, one video. Yeah.
oh, okay.
Yeah. See, can be able to see same video.
Do you want to do? I thought we were going to have a conversation with the community.
One video, so then Q&A.
Okay. You're in charge.
Typical models for me emerged by realizing that the problems that we needed to solve to address most real world applications went beyond, you have a vector representation of an input and a single, oftentimes binary or at best continuous output. There was so much more opportunity to think about richly structured environments, richly structured problems. So even if you think about problems like understanding what is in an image, that's not a single label problem of there is a dog, because images are complex and there is interrelationships between the different objects. You wanted to get beyond the yes, no, is there a dog in this image, to something that is much more rich. There's a dog and a frisbee and a beach and 3 kids building a sandcastle. You have a rich input and a rich output. Thinking about these richly structured domains gave rise to, we have to think about multiple variables, we have to think about the interactions between those variables and leverage that structure both in our input and our output space in order to get to much better conclusions and deal with problems that really matter.
Okay. Great. So perhaps people want to talk about what are the issues you see in building trust in this new sort of AI age? And we heard about security, which I hardly agree with. Education, hardly agree with. Sustainability is obviously a key element here. We have a lot of expertise up here. I like to tell tales of things that famous people said to me. So I really have, do people have questions or discussion?
What are we missing?
What are we missing? Those are good. Oh, what do you have?
Thank you very much. It's really interesting and important. I share the goal of building trust, but I think to build trust, we have to have people who share power with those who are in the because if we leave it just to the big developers, we are going to be, they're in a race to become the one that has general AI, more powerful than human intellect. And I think that's the wrong problem. So I'm very interested, how do we get that level of participation, whether it's those of us who believe in different kinds of values, or workers who are being displaced by the technologies, having a voice in shaping what the problems are that we're using these technologies.
So I have a take with this one. I know the leadership of a lot of the countries that are doing this fairly well. They're not playing that game. They don't particularly care about frontier models. What they care about is owning the data rails. So it's good enough AI everywhere. They want to be able to have a long-term business where you're providing all the infrastructure. You want to be the Microsoft in the next age. And that's clearly what India is about. They're winning at the moment with a thing called the Citizen Stack, which has gotten, 1.4 billion people new customers outside India in the last 3 years. Abu Dhabi, another one that is targeting all of Africa. I know people in the Vatican that are even for this.
There's going to be an encyclical on this very soon.
Yeah, I mean, so the game seems to be among all the sort of major players, except the US, is we want to own the rails everywhere. And it's not necessarily frontier, it's good. And if we run it, we can see the data, we can have revenue off of it. And I think we need to stop listening to Sam Altman maybe as much as we have. And sort of think about who's going to be using this in the whole world. I don't know. You guys have something?
Well, I think what you said just underscores my pessimistic conclusion that resilience is at least in part political. That what you're talking about is a commitment to values that say that of inclusion. I guess in this audience I can use the word inclusion. That you have to be willing to say that the users who are going to be affected and so even the non-users who are going to be affected have a stake in this. that's a very political statement. And how you get that message across in a world of tech oligarchs is a very interesting question.
So, but I'll argue with you just a little bit. You're absolutely right about, particularly the American context. But if you look at what most national leaders want to do, first of all, most people aren't US or Europe. Okay? Just like we're the odd here people. Okay? But most people want to have AI in their country so they can have better systems and so they can maybe have more control. Most leadership don't want either American or Chinese systems because we've sort of shown that reduces your sovereignty. So they're after that sort of inclusion.
I'm sorry, there's
yeah.
one more thing that these leaders really want or are doing is technology leapfrogging. They are moving into the frontier without having to go through all the industrialization steps. And that's in a way what that investments in AI and its diffusion means for them pragmatically. Now, does this translate into their democracy? No. But what does it translate into for potentially improving the daily life of their citizens is really what we're thinking about.
Yeah, well, I think control is actually sort of the.
Well, I think that.
It's like, everybody who's deploying these things, and I'm not talking about the hyperscalers, I'm talking about the national interests, are doing it so that they can have greater control as well as greater revenue. And that's going to be an interesting situation.
An anecdote here. I asked, from time to time I get invited to China to go to a talk or something. And I put in my profile, I'm ethnic Chinese. My parents were Chinese, born in the United States. I asked Gemini, ChatGPT, and Anthropic the question, given my profile, am I at risk for going to China physically? And they all said yes. Then I asked DeepSeek the same question. DeepSeek gave me an answer, you could see the answer thinking out, and it came to the same conclusion that all these other did. And then it said, and it erased it all and said, I can't talk about that.
Oh, charming, yeah.
So,
that's exactly right. So those are some issues that I don't think.
No, I'm not gonna go.
It's interesting. We do a lot with detecting national influence campaigns and stuff. It's amazing what's out there. So, there's a hand up.
Hi, great discussion. So regarding the topic that you're just talking about trust and resiliency. So, and I get what the panel is focusing on. Now, I believe there could be two parts to this equation, right? So one is the data that is being inputted into LLM for training purposes and further development. And then there's the output part of it. Now, I get your point around manipulation, right? So even if the intent was not to be manipulative, but to be too representative of the data is being inputted. But there's this ocean of data that's being inputted. How are we thinking about trustworthiness of that particular data itself? And what is the governance mechanism around that as this gets deployed at scale?
So what you see is the original models, which is we're going to grab everything. What people have discovered is if you use higher quality data, you get smarter models. So now there's a sort of push to really sort of curate what you use. And of course, there's a lot of economics. For instance, Anthropic recently had an interesting court decision where it was their use of books, for instance, was approved by the court, but ended up with damages that were several $1 billion. So they chose the billions of dollars of fines, even though they had gotten free in court. Why? Well, because that precedent is magnified by a factor of 10 for OpenAI, right? They paid $3 billion, OpenAI is gonna have to come up with 30 billion, right? So that's the guess. As one of the gentlemen here said, you need to pay attention to where the data comes from. And this is one of the biggest things about sovereign AI, your experience with, and then I can't talk about that. People are really sort of pissed that all of that data, the vast majority of that data are Americans. Even if it's Turkish speakers in America, which is different than Turkish speakers in Anatolia, right? So, yeah, but I think that people are working on it. I guess is what, yeah.
Well, there are some firms that say that you should not use any data that was put onto the internet before, after 2022. Why 2022? Because that's when ChatGPT was released. Right? So you can't trust any data that's, post AI, because you're going to start, training yourself on AI generated data. And that's, I don't know that that's exactly the right number or that the right approach, but there's something to it. It's well understood that if you train on data that's been generated by AI, eventually you're going to get model collapse. And this is a real problem. And synthetic data doesn't help.
That's right.
So
Yeah, it really doesn't. There is another finding, though, sort of a new finding, that if your data is old, the smartness of the model decreases fairly quickly. So you have to have the most recent.
that's the tension.
And it has to do with the changing cultures and situations.
That's the tension, right?
You need that absolute recent. Yeah, so you got a problem there.
Therefore, summarize your points. Give us a one-liner from the therefore.
Current models don't keep up with events very well. They're trained in a fairly crystalline way, where it's a big process. You can tune them a little bit. That's sort of expensive. But what people are looking to do is deal with long-term memory, so that you can train them continuously and you build up a sense of time, so that when somebody asks you something that's likely to be recent, you get a recent answer. But that's
It's the use of temporality.
I mean, that's the geek answer.
Yeah, my dear.
I mean, perhaps where I was taking this to an extreme was to your point that if there's sovereign AI, right, and sort of that's being created by a government in a particular country, and we know sort of depending on the regime, there is obviously they have their own biases and they want to influence culture and behavior and alter history, and the implications of countries developing sovereign AI that have certain inbuilt biases in them that influences the population. But just
Well, for us, I'm an advisor to Abu Dhabi. They built a model. It's a really good reasoning model, but it doesn't have content. It's meant for being sovereign AI, where a country will take that basic model and add its own content. And I think you're going to see more and more stuff like that. There are a bunch of hands up over here.
That either they sell or give us a gift.
It's a Red Hat model. You get it for free, but they'll maintain it for you. And I can tell you more about why that's interesting if you want. Yeah.
I want to add to your example. I'm publisher of the Freedom Index, where we have one focus on the question, why do people are no longer willing to speak their mind? In Germany, it was 86% after the wall coming down, where people said, yes, I'm free to express what I want and what I think. And it's now down to 40%. And so the annual Freedom Index is measuring how is progress. So I was asking AI 2 weeks before we launched the next Freedom Index, what do you think will be the result of next Freedom Index? And the first responses which I received from AI was like a good student giving me the results of last year's Freedom Index. And then I said, well, that's fine. I know the last one, but I'm interested in the new one. We have an idea. Is it developing to the better or to the worse? And I got the question back, well, what do you mean? And then I said, well, we had several elections going on this year, And usually when you have elections, you have different opportunities. In the media, people discuss different perspectives. So I could have thought that the trend would get better. The response of all AI options was, I'm now ending the conversation. And I said, why? Well, when it comes to democracy, I'm out.
That's interesting.
That is interesting.
So which AI models did you use?
All four, Perplexity, and it's 18 months ago.
So a year ago, we had Audrey Tang here. She was the IT minister for Taiwan and told a story that about 10 years ago, only 7% of the people in Taiwan trusted the government. And then they instantiated a community-based digital conversation. It's an AI mediated conversation, very simple AI. And now the trust in the government is 70%. It hasn't been 70% in the United States probably ever. So there's maybe hope. What is it about that example that worked? And how can we bring that example to the rest of us? Yeah, back there.
Yeah, hi Sandy. I'm Carrie Carlson. I work at the Sloan School. I'm a principal research scientist. I'm interested in the behavioral side of AI and technology in general. I'm just wondering from your perspective, Anna's perspective, what is different about AI now where we're really concerned about trustworthiness of the output compared to say things like IT 30 years ago when we all started our career? One of the pioneers was Shoshana Zuboff, and she did a lot of work in the area of infomate, automate, turning things that were processes that we did manually into information processes. And I remember these same discussions. How can we trust the output? How can we make sure that it's used appropriately? What is different today about the technologies that we're looking at that make this such a, and I agree it's a compelling argument, but I'd be interested in the panel's perspective. What makes this a compelling issue right now?
Go for it.
I mean, so with generative AI, a lot of it has been because of hallucinations and deepfakes and things like that. It's just really brought it to the forefront of the general public.
But also the speed and the perceived complexity and the actual complexity with which all this is happening. And speed may have a lot to do with it.
I think it's because it tells stories. You know, when you had just machine learning or something like that, you had to look at the numbers and graph things and you did statistical processes. This just says, no, this is the way it is. And that fast, that sort of lucid, and so it's very believable. And since you didn't go through it all yourself, you don't know where to identify the skips in logic. The other thing is the data is such a problematic thing. All the stuff it's trained on is performative. It's the things that humans said out loud to other humans to persuade them. That's the best way to characterize all the data. Well, you know, that didn't do what was in our heads. They don't have access to that, so they're not trained on that. They're not trained on private conversations. So they're missing a huge slice of human behavior, and that's problematic.
So the basic difference is that it looks more fluid. That's right, and and the danger is that people will mistake that fluency for competency, for real expertise.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think there's a compelling argument to be made that people trust the output of a technology. If you go to ChatGPT or a Gen AI tool and gives you an answer, you tend to trust it. So I agree that the general public argument, that's where my research is around actually. So the general public issue and the stories that it tells, but the data piece is interesting because in the 90s when we started automating all these other processes, we did the same thing. We took people out of the process, we put technology in, and we let the technologies make decisions. And we saw distrust at that point also. It took a long time for people to trust the technology to do their job or to supplement or augment their job. And I'm wondering if there's lessons from back there that we can apply in building trustworthy AI today.
Were you ever successful at getting people to not trust the technology of 30 years ago? I wasn't.
So we did a town hall in the city of Washington DC, so not politicians, poor people getting services. We asked them, what sort of thing would you like from AI in your city and your city government? And the thing that they came up with, that people responded is, I want a personal AI that helps me deal with all the complexity of this other stuff in government and out in the real world. I want something that knows where the forms are, what this term means, what I should put in. I want a defender. And I understand that.
That's process, that is process, it would be terrific, that is process, and you
Yeah.
were buried in processing on that. But it's not, I think Carrie maybe had in mind something more substantive than process, the tax forms, more associated more with human life or human behavior. There's something, we're aggregating the question across various domains, and it's not clear to me how to.
Taxes are different than love life or something like that. That's right, yeah. But I think the data that it's trained on is very odd for a lot of the things it's used for. Right? Just think about what you would say in front of a class. And is that the same thing you would say for personal advice? Probably not.
I want to push back on the two of you on that process. And so I don't believe it. Because what you said was that AI is going to be good for understanding processes. And to a certain extent, I think that's true. But it's never going to get the unwritten process, the unwritten rules that govern organizations. For example, it's never going to know that George over there is the person you really have to go to for a problem, and Sam and everybody else there, they just stick to the rules. But George actually listens to you and helps to solve your problem. AI is never going to do that because that's not written down anywhere. And so when you talk about mastery of process, I mean, there's the formal mastery of it in, what the rules say. And I agree that that's very important to be able to work and so on. But to actually manipulate a bureaucracy and to get out of the bureaucracy what you want to happen, AI it takes a real bureaucratic hacker to understand, who's the most important person to actually talk to.
So an interesting thing is what Intuit does, when it does your taxes. Now, you might think that that was just AI doing process, right? But actually they hire 10,000 accountants every year to look at calls that are not black and white. It's like, are you gonna get away with this? What do you do? It's all judgment. Maybe it's not even according to the law, but it's what he does. And then they use those 10,000 people for the next year, right? So it's sort of a statistical thing with the process. That is an interesting way to think about it.
Well, it's also maybe an interesting way to think of ways in which the human is back in there somewhere. And I don't think we have protocols for that. So there's also the issue of getting on the phone and trying to talk to some human, and you can't do that. So literally you can't do that. So the task of bringing the human back in again, do we want that?
Oh, I think we have to, yeah.
Yeah, I know trust is at a lot of different levels of trust. And I'm sort of going to ask about a very low level of trust, which is, the idea like, for example, it should be easy and routine to prove who you are when you're talking to anyone. Or a friend sends you a document, should you open it? Or am I talking to a human or am I talking to a bot? And those sorts of questions, are they, something that you're also really concerned with and that probably could become easy to do in the future?
So those are really key, and you see people like Cloudflare and so forth doing sort of hacks at that. Fortunately, there are people who are more serious, like Open ID Foundation, and I run a group with ITF, which is the basic protocols of the internet, for exactly those questions. You ought to know where this stuff came from, and you ought to be able to have attestations of the thing where it came from, so that you know things that you need to know about it. A lot of people talk about proof of human. I think you need to go a little bit further. The place you see it happening first is in finance, where there's a thing called the travel rule, which means you have to have provenance of things, so that in a legal dispute, you can trace back where the money came from. So, yeah, it's happening. Is it there? No. Is it gonna be there? I think we'll have a number of disasters and then people will finally say, yeah, okay, now we understand.
If I can follow up with a personal, not an anecdote, but a situation. I have, my married name is for taxes, etc. My name at MIT is not my married name. What goes to the pharmacy, MIT pharmacy for a renewal of whatever it is different from what comes from some other place. And the time it takes to reconcile, same human being, all these, takes a lot of time. And it seems to be such a pedestrian thing, but no, eventually social security number comes out. But that story, that distinctive problem is not distinctive. Lots of people have this alignment of legal identities of some sort. It'd be nice if we could have, it would be nice if we could trust a mechanism that would not create more problems along those lines, as opposed to anything else. That's another version of the bureaucratic world.
So, questions, things? Yes, sir.
You talked a lot about the importance of provenance to sort of track the effects of it. And obviously, that's hugely important, but obviously, you have provenance for every action, everything, there is no privacy. So the question is, how do you figure out like where anonymity should exist and what are the key infrastructure elements where you think it's really critically important? And then also especially like where you think the technical, custody tactics, all kinds of things like that.
I mean, the way it's actually done in the real world, credit cards know a lot about you, but it's actually hard to get at that data unless there's a legal dispute and there's a court order. So usually societies end up having some process about being able to reveal the data, but the data is in fact someplace. Right? And that has, I mean, there's pluses and minuses of that, but yes, yeah.
There are also a lot of cryptographic techniques that could be used, for example, to reliably and correctly convince you that something came from a source that, one of a set of trusted sources, and without identifying which one.
Yeah.
So that's just an example of the kind of thing that modern cryptography can do, but it can play a role in precisely the kinds of questions you're asking about. So there are tools out there that can be very helpful.
Yeah, I guess I was asking, I mean, I'm unaware of those, and I guess some of the technical discussion that probably most people here aren't interested in. It's just like institutions, like who would you look to for this? I mean, would you look to a particular sovereign country? Would you look at the UN? Would you look to the OECD or institutions? I guess, the media now, what you need to trust, where is this gonna come from? Like where educating people and making sure these tools out there are available, and when you use them, you haven't basically just been trapped and honey trapped.
Well, things like the ITFs, basic protocols, right, are putting more and more provenance in there because spoofing is just a moral problem. Okay, so they're sort of finally adding that level. And then the question of who gets to look back and figure out what happens in our society tends to be the courts. But in the world as a whole, there's a thing called FATF, which is the fraud task forces every country maintains in their own self-interest. And it develops processes and protocols for revealing data when there are good reasons because of potential fraud. This is what MasterCard does. Now, you may not like this, but it turns out nations don't like fraud more than they like privacy. So, it's a tension. Yeah, I mean, Cynthia's exactly right, is that there's a lot of cryptographic things that could make this a lot easier. And even with many of those things, there's somebody has the keys, the cryptographic keys, to be able to look at things.
But I mean, the fundamental problem never goes away. This is never, there's no solution to this problem. There's only ways to address it. Or would you disagree with anybody disagree?
I don't disagree with
It
that.
really makes sense. It's not like we figure out what the issue is, AI, we figure out how to solve it. An engineer might think that way if they were thinking like that, it's all for once, but.
I think it's a fundamental, there are cases where you want to not have privacy, right? But you would normally have privacy.
The whole issue of values, security, all of this, I'm saying, it's gonna be ongoing thing.
I had a conversation with the Prime Minister of France once, and he said, you know, I had this case where a young girl had been kidnapped, and it was absolutely against the law to use the GPS signals and things like that to find out where she was, but I did it anyhow. Okay, so that's a sure. Well, sure.
No, I'm saying, exactly, that's a good thing.
I think it's a good thing too, but he had to act against the law because this was a case where if he could do that quickly, the girl could be recovered. Right? So he just called it like that. It's a tension, yeah. Sir?
What about the issue, the jurisdiction, cross jurisdiction problems? Now, I'm from Africa, so I pretty much see the problem from a point of view of data. That's how things are today, right? But my question is, the leaders in AI today, are they willing to accept the principle of, whatever rules they play by are actually universal, meaning anyone can train their models or can, you are talking about sovereign AI, etc., with data that also comes from the United States. Is that something that people are willing to accept?
You're saying train the model using US data?
Yeah, in the same way that leaders today are willing to train based on data that is coming from other let's say, leaders are using or want to use from other jurisdictions. So my question is that tension. Is it something?
When I talk to leaders, they don't want to do that, but as a practical matter, they have to.
They have to, yeah.
Right?
Oh, they-
However, what you can do, there's actually a big effort by the hyperscalers in this area, where you take the models as they're trained today, and you retrain them in other languages, local commentary. And it turns out there are techniques for doing that that are reasonably priced. And it's not like the billions of dollars. So there's a big effort to do like the top 60 languages. That way, like we're doing this with Ghana. They want to have a debate, a digital debate about the new constitution that's proposed. But nobody speaks English, or not that many people speak English. There's 3 languages. And so they're developing AI technology that speaks those languages so that they can have a digital debate in the sort of vernacular and with the way it's thought about.
So,
I think you'll see more of that.
but I think at stake, I'm sorry, it's involved here is the mechanisms for leveling the playing field. And in a way, there's a positive side to that, once you know what's involved, as opposed to having to deal every time with almost impenetrable barriers to culture, language, etc.
Well, let me push on that a little bit.
Can I just enter Patrick real quick? So there are some techniques that have come from the algorithmic fairness literature that would be, you mentioned medical data, would be particularly relevant. So an example, shortly after the outbreak of COVID, there was a lot of data already from China, but there was less data, medical data from the rest of the world. Clalit, the largest healthcare provider in Israel, used these techniques to, in some sense, adapt the data, the medical data from China, to in terms that could predict who would be at high risk of severe COVID, to adapt that to the local population in Israel, which was quite different. So for example, the rates of smoking are very different in different strata of the population. And that affected the COVID prediction outcomes. So there are these techniques that can be very helpful in those kinds of settings. It's not everything, but it's something.
The thing with Ghana, for instance, the way that the leaders talk about the Constitution is different than the way the citizens talk about it. The phrases are different, the semantics are different. And so if you're going to have a debate, you better have tools that understand what people actually mean in their own sort of conceptual framework. You shouldn't be doing it in terms of Oxford educated people who happen to live in Ghana. So, there's tensions there. Sure.
I'm Glenn Urban, professor and dean emeritus, Sloan School of Management. I wanted to change a little bit back to your original question, what other things should we think about in the future? With agents coming in AI, we're going to a whole nother level of advice and trust. Accuracy of data is perfectly required, but generally people will not trust the computer system to do things like health planning, retirement planning, financial planning. And the key element I see there is benevolence. That is, you trust people, if you ask people here, who do you trust and why? It's not because they have accurate information, it's because they behave in your interest. They represent you and advocate for you, they're benevolent. My question is, how is benevolence going to be part of this future picture? And even with perfect data and standards, how do we get people to trust AI so we can get the benefit of these better outcomes?
So the research group I run at Stanford is exactly that. It's called duty of loyalty. It's what you need to have to be a fiduciary, like a doctor or a lawyer, okay? And what it means is you're acting in the interest of the client, not in your own interest. And the way we do it operationally today is there's a set of tests that you do if you're a law student, or tests that you do if you're in the judiciary, and you can apply those tests to an AI. And we have a little package that does that, right, that the law school people put together. And what it does is it does something which is perhaps not so good, which is that it says, well, this AI looks like a human fiduciary, but that doesn't mean that AI is going to really behave that way, right? So it's an open problem.
I think that's great, but people build trust slowly by getting actions back that you did reflect my interest. So we really have to have an evolutionary trust building process and certification, and those tests would be, but how do you get people to trust the system enough to take the steps that are going to build something where they accept it? Today, if you ask anybody, who do you trust, how much trust in the government, how much trust in your friends, trust levels are all-time low. There's danger that all these AI systems with advisors will not be used, and we won't get the benefits of the technology. I have not mean to say that your center's not doing great things, but I think that's the first step that we really need to build into the future.
So yesterday, Visa announced AI agent interfaces, and the core thing that they talked about in their press release was trust. And their strategy for building trust is insurance, right? So you're not on the stick for big things, right? But also a sort of scaled familiarity so that people will find out that the performance of their Visa AI is actually good. Now, we'll see where that goes. I think there's some real bugs that might happen out of that, but you just have to do your best and see what happens and then go back. And so if take that strategy, you better have a sandbox where it's really walled in and it's not, and you can learn without killing people.
Can you say something like insurance part? Is that insurance?
Yeah, so one of the hotbeds on the West Coast, right, but lots of places, is despair over laws for AI, despair over regulations for AI. But the way things actually often work is economic incentives. And so if you can specify guardrails that minimize the risk enough that you can get insurance on something, then you have a sort of capitalist version of trust. So there's a number of big programs in lots of different countries, because remember, like trade is international, right? Where people are working to develop guardrails that are good enough that you can provide insurance for international trade. And when you buy 1 million widgets, you have to know that it's gonna get there, or somebody else pays the bill, right? And with credit cards, the history is, when the credit cards were put out, nobody used them, because you were on the stick for the full amount of whatever somebody would charge against it, right? And then they bought it, they sort of hardened it enough that they could have insurance, which meant you never ever lose more than $50, right? At least that's the way it appears. And so the insurance thing is a sort of hot topic. The lawyers think this can work, like the law school thinks it can work. Some of the insurance companies and the reinsurers think it can work. And I just got to figure out how do you build those guardrails in such a way that it's detectable when it screws up, and that the incidence of screw up is low enough for it's a decent economic proposition. But that's only going to work for things that are essentially sort of commerce, or where there's really a clear liability structure. You can't like insure foundation walls or something. Not going to happen. Not for a long time.
There's another setting where you have to have that kind of ability to challenge what comes out of AI.
Yeah.
And healthcare is the primary
Yeah,
example.
yeah.
I've been involved in a negotiation between healthcare workers
Right.
and a big healthcare company, a good company, over who gets the last word on a diagnosis if it comes down and I find that I'm supposed to give this drug, but I know this patient, I know her history from yesterday, and I know what else this patient is getting. And we've got to keep that control, because the professional said, it's my license, it's my patient, and it's not that I should ignore what the algorithm is telling me. That's good, that's information.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But we've got to make sure that humans control that ultimate decision.
So
So
from the
That's-
liability point of view, right?
Yes.
But they said it's your license.
That's right.
So what that is a type of economic and reputational incentive for you to deal with the AI correctly.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's the thing that has occurred to people is that if there's a human using it and the human's on the stick for whatever liability, then they're going to be strongly motivated to make use of whatever controls and other sort of protocols they want.
This human as a boss, we disagree.
Yeah, there are lots of problems like that, yeah.
I'll add to the complexity of healthcare and just say that is true with a constellation of symptoms or a constellation of diagnoses where you're trying to come up with a new diagnosis. It's also the case that sometimes the human is worse than the AI.
Yes.
And in fact, increasingly in the digital space, in
Yep.
radiology and dermatology and GI and colonoscopies, you can actually find the AI is working better, and when we keep the humans in the loop, we're making it worse.
Ooh.
So,
But let somebody.
let me-
This is absolutely, you can't take the AI and stick it in jail. Doesn't make any sense.
Let me give
Somebody
you-
who's really motivated.
So you have to, in that setting, you have to train humans to know how to use the AI effectively and when to challenge it. That's the issue here. It's not that the AI can't make
Yeah,
better
that's really
predictions.
good.
Yeah, that's good.
It's really
That's
the training.
Right.
So it's this question of incentives for the people.
let me give you an example from the airline industry. There are two major airplane manufacturers. There's Boeing and Airbus. They have entirely different philosophies about computer control of the airplanes. Airbus says the computer is going to enforce safety limits, regardless of what the pilot says. The Boeing philosophy is the computer advises, but will let the pilot push the plane beyond its established parameters, quote, in an emergency, unquote. And that's you. Which is better? I don't know how to answer that question.
You know what the Air Force does? They have like a 25-year debate about this. When the computer sees that the chance of this airplane crashing in the next 1.5 seconds is sufficiently high, it will take over control and do maneuvers that are not good for human health, but better than crashing into the mountain.
The point is that this is, it's a fundamental, it's a philosophical debate in a sense. And I don't know of any, quote, objective way to resolve it. If you do, I'd love to hear it. But when we're also human
Can
factors.
I have a point? Underscore.
Can we make you the last one?
The MIT gentleman's point. I spent some time teaching at MIT. By the way, background, I chair entrepreneurship at Howard, and I'm the artist resident at Yale. I'm a practitioner. I'm a longtime private equity person who did a TED talk on kindness because I reinvented, created a brand new system of arguably the largest black-owned company in the United States. So the entire active lab behavior. There's a big difference in trust. I think this point should not be glossed over. You said benevolence. It's not loyalty. It's a different motivation. It's a different word. So that's why I couldn't come up with a better word for my TED talk than kindness. And so in my book, I asked, can AI be kind? Can it be kind? And so on the insurance standpoint, let me give you an example from a very practical standpoint. This was a business that you can imagine was not the recipient of a lot of benevolence from Wall Street. This company, 24 years, plus size black women, national business, hundreds of millions of dollars. It was the recipient of every short end of systems dynamics possibly imagined. We couldn't get insurance, but even after I showed up, found money, I couldn't legally operate the company because no one would insure the company. So, like, how do you underscore and do massive behavior change? There was a lot of latent agency in the women. It was really smothered. There's a feeling of more helplessness. So, how do you unearth agency through unlearning? And then, honestly, it's teaching the opposite vectors of everything I learned at 7 years of Harvard in my career. So, let me give you an example on insurance. We became the darling of the insurance company. We shattered every actuarial table. Yeah. These are very simple things, right? These preventative benevolence, preventative munificence, love, kindness, which generally doesn't want to get discussed in my private equity boardrooms or frankly in these ones, but it does need to be spoken about. So I think one of the examples was like a simple light bulb. We need to pour through the actuarial data to realize that like something like 78% of the incidents were related to the fact that accounting was priming the company to expense light bulbs, so they wouldn't invest in expensive light bulbs. It was treated as an expense versus investment in human capital, right? So we put the best light bulbs you could possibly put in place. These light bulbs made obsolete your need for ladders. Actuarial tables got shattered, the stores were brighter. Evening hour revenues increased, everyone made more money. The need for social media increased because it became a community center, everyone filmed it, we became the darling of Salesforce and Facebook. These type of, that motivation for putting the light bulb in place was not to extract and make money. It was a sincere desire to realize that when you come to work, no matter what the workers' compensation regime allows you to do and outsource accountability, people should not get hurt coming to work. Fundamentally, right? And so this, I just want to underscore this, like these words like benevolence, kindness, these are things that are not taught here. They are taught as a society from a very early age. And they need to discuss more. These are all, a lot of these things are trust, these are preventive. We have to raise things that have this sort of judgment. And so I don't see how it's not a political concept, because it's literally about values and how human beings are. So, anyway, I want to.
So the duty of loyalty thing is the legal duty. And you're right, it's sort of long term. Because the underlying thing is this notion of trust. And there's a long conversation we could have about this. Benevolence is part of it. I think a lot of the literature suggests that it's expectation that the other parties will treat you fairly. Reciprocity is a sense of we're all part of the same, things like that in the sociological literature. But I think it's absolutely key, yeah, absolutely. And the duty of loyalty is just a test that the lawyers have. So there's also something called duty of care, which is a scam. Because it requires that, this is what Amazon does, it has duty of care in its terms and conditions. To prove that they violated duty of care, you have to prove that there was expectation of a fiduciary relationship, which is not something you can do. So that means that they can just be crazy with what they do, and they won't be violating the terms and conditions, or will be liable in most courts. Yeah. Here, we should come to an end here. Yes? Okay, good.
Thank you so much, Sandy, for wonderful panel, and thank you for your all great attention and great enthusiasm to discuss. So now we are break time for 15 minutes. So we have tea, continue tea, coffee, and for continue discussion. And we look forward to you here at 11:50 on time, because we have many very important content and that we continue. So now, 11:15, come back here.
All right.
Since the great first grade also. No. Yeah. We live in the same town, but yeah, we know each other since the first grade. You're heading up? Lovely. I'll probably few things. Yeah, I saw your reels. Yes, I saw your reels. Yeah. Did you see it? I did not. In fact, I had a responsibility right after that. No, I did. I did see that. I did see I did not see I had no long story short, that is pretty much it's just pointing no, but that remember I told you did you provide
But when David was here, he said, yes, I was showing him, I was bringing him video or something like that. But the board also wants us to do what building named after the real people. Yeah. No, but then maybe what you needed to give them was a pathway to it, and how it should take 10 years to get there. No, but that's what you need to give them to the why do you need rather how long will it take? The answer could be never. Or what would it take? But I think those are the disconnects right now. Because I think, and I'm speculating here, I don't know. Why don't you get out?
So you're absolutely right.
Please have an action for all people can. You are most important.
Okay, I'm not.
Awesome. Right here. Big smile. We're happy. Happy. Big smile. Nice. One of those. Thank you.
Please. I promise. Oh, yeah,
Hello, hello. Dear my distinguished guests, we would like to come back and continue our agenda now. Please come back and sit. Please sit, take the seat down. Oh, my dear distinguished guests, please take the seat. Now we start to do. We are continue our agenda now. Thank you. Okay, now we are start to second part, and we are very honored to introduce Ramu Damodaran. He is a executive board member of Boston Global Forum in New York. But he is a wonderful and dear friend of Boston Global Forum for a long time in United Nations. He is a founding chief of United Nations Academic Impact, and also he is editor-in-chief of UN Chronicle magazine, and now he is a member of Peace University in New York and Costa Rica UN University. So we are very honored to introduce Ramu Damodaran. He is more than our board member. He is a very, very deep thinker and a dear friend, and continue work with us. And Ramu Damodaran.
Thank you, Tuan. You mentioned my United Nations career. One of the things we are taught in the UN about conducting meetings is never have a coffee break, because you will invariably lose half your audience. But that said, I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be with you, and that too on discussing a number of unfamiliar attributes to the age or the era of AI and all that comes to it with it. Think of those three cardinal principles that we intend to focus on as a result of the learning from this book: love, creativity, nobility. And these came to mind the other day when I was watching King Charles III speak to the Houses of Congress on his visit to the United States, and I thought of another royal visit to this country half a century ago, when the United States was celebrating its bicentennial, when Queen Elizabeth came to the city of Boston and was walking down from the royal yacht to land, to be received by Governor Michael Dukakis. The governor had been told one thing by British security: whatever you do not touch Her Majesty. And he was prepared to live with this. He stood at the bottom of the ramp leading up to the yacht. And as she was about to come down, he saw that she had missed a step and was really gliding down the ramp. And so he immediately put himself against the balustrade so that if he were to interrupt a possible fall, it would be she touching him and not he touching her. And when that happened, just before she reached that pivotal point, she was able to straighten herself and walk down and greet the governor and other members of the assembled party. And I thought how that incident really epitomized the themes that Tuan, Tom, and Governor Dukakis himself have led to today's celebration: love, creativity, and nobility. Love, because what the governor showed at that time was the love of the people of Boston, of Massachusetts, for their royal visitor, which allowed for no discomfort or no pain to be borne by her. Creativity, because rather than doing the customary thing of having a line of people to stem her fall, he put himself discreetly in the line of her path so that she would touch him and then be stopped. And nobility, because he realized that this had to be done with class and with conscience. And that is exactly what happened. Now that, to my mind, is a metaphor of all that we have discussed today, and the idea of the beacon declaration, as we call it, and the process of the AI age. And again, thinking of beacon, I look at the farewell address that President Jimmy Carter, of whom we've heard so much this morning, particularly from his grandson Jason, the farewell address that he gave to the American people, where he said, "It is time for our country to hold a beacon and watch that road ahead, and as citizens across this land carry its light forward." So the metaphor, if you will, of beacon and all it represents is something unique, not only to the United States, to its leadership, but to the women and men who have constituted this great and transcendent nation. So today, in the Loeb House of Harvard University, on the occasion of America at 250, a beacon for the AI age, we stand not only to celebrate history, but to help use it to shape our future. We honor 250 years of America, 250 years of freedom, of creativity, of democratic aspiration, and of leadership. Leadership which has helped inspire the modern world. Leadership by America, leadership by Americans. But today we also look ahead to the age of artificial intelligence, and we affirm a truth of historic importance. The new age cannot be guided by intelligence alone. It cannot be guided by power alone. It cannot be guided by innovation alone. What the AI age must be shaped by is trust. And we heard many references to that in the panel just before our break, which Dr. Pentland so ably moderated and drew upon the vast talent in this room to share that essentiality, if you will, of trust, or the conscious willingness to suspend trust as part of our evolving scientific being. Responsibility, human dignity, culture, moral purpose. These are the attributes we seek from new cerebral technologies. And for this reason, the Boston Global Forum has declared today the advancement of two essential and complementary pillars for the future of humanity. The first is the AIWS, the Artificial Intelligence World Society, the AIWS Trust Infrastructure, a practical architecture for trust in the AI age. It has been created to guide governments, institutions, businesses, academic institutions, so ably represented here, and society. It does so through standards, accountability, trusted implementation, and human-centered values. The second is AIWS Lumina, a global cultural architecture for the AI age, grounded in love, creativity, and nobility. Created by the illumination of and by the human spirit, through culture, inspiration, beauty, and the nobility of values. In a time of profound technological transformation, together, these three pillars will constitute the beacon of the AI age. AIWS Trust Infrastructure, besides the architecture of trust and builds upon it, AIWS Lumina illuminates the culture of our single shared humanity. Meeting in Loeb House, we at the Boston Global Forum further affirm that we will continue to hold the leading role in this effort, providing the strategic vision, the core standards, the guiding values, and the international global direction for the advancement and the longevity of the two pillars. All implementation partnerships and regional initiatives shall be developed in alignment with the strategy, the standards, values, and leadership of the Boston Global Forum. It is in this spirit that we particularly welcome Vietnam Report as a committed implementation and support partner, working with the Forum to advance AIWS Trust and AIWS Lumina. Especially in Vietnam, ASEAN, and all the activities that we have planned with Tuan's imaginative leadership on the 10th anniversary of AIWS later this year. We welcome cooperation with the LDP Global South, with the coordination of Yasuhide Nakayama, the Diet member and director of the LDP Global Security, based in Japan. We welcome Media Tenor, led by the soft but always creative Roland Schatz, who's with us this morning, which will be our cooperating partner in Europe and beyond to realize this declaration and the establishment of the Beacon process. Roland, many years ago, working for Media Tenor, came up with the phrase awareness threshold, which at that time was the measuring of how people react to news and programs on television, because television was really the determinant how far and fast technology had grown. Today, as television proves almost archaic, we use that idea of the awareness threshold for what we're dealing with today, artificial intelligence, to make sure that at no point does AI become so slack, so infidel, so hostile, as to compel us to retreat from it, to try and cage it, and work with more primitive tools at our command. The Boston Global Forum pledges itself to lead partners who will implement the alignment, and the road to our AIWS 2027 will be the phase of our realization, a phase to advance the trust infrastructure a phase to advance Lumina, a phase to help build not only an AI society, but yes, an AI civilization. A civilization that is not only intelligent, but brings intelligence together with trustworthy, humane creativity and nobility. This is the beacon declaration we put before you. This is the beacon declaration we look forward to being debated upon in the panel that is going to come before us to talk about what the forum expects, what the forum wants to do, and what the forum needs from each one of us. I will now share with you the remarks of Mr. Yasude Nakayama, who was unable to be with us today, but who sent a text in advance. Should I go ahead for a minute? Yes. It is a great honor for me to join you today at this remarkable conference, America at 250, a beacon for the AI age. At this historic moment, we celebrate not only 250 years of America, but also a larger vision for the future of humanity in the age of artificial intelligence. I'm especially honored to be here in two roles, as the BGF representative in Japan and as director of the LDP Global South. In both roles, I wish to express my deep appreciation for the vision and the leadership of the Boston Global Forum. Yet ideas advanced here are not ordinary ideas. They are ideas for a new era. They are ideas to help guide humanity through one of the most great transformations in history. Among them, I believe that AIWS trust infrastructure is of profound importance. In the AI age, trust must not remain an abstract ideal. It must become a real foundation for governance, cooperation, innovation, and peace. It must be built into the systems we create, the institutions we lead, and the partnerships we form. That is why I am pleased to support the advancement of AIWS trust infrastructure in Japan and across the Global South. I believe this effort can help open a new path, a path where AI is guided not only by capability, but by responsibility. Not only by speed, but by wisdom. Not only by power, but by trust. I also wish to express my deep respect for AIWS Lumina. To me, AIWS Lumina is a beautiful and necessary vision. It reminds us that the future cannot be shaped by technology alone. The AI age must also be guided by culture, by beauty, by reflection, and by the noble values that elevate the human spirit. In this, I feel that Japan is deeply close to the standards of AIWS Lumina, the spirit of harmony, the respect for beauty, the discipline of culture, the value of reflection, the connection between tradition and the future. These are qualities deeply embedded in Japanese civilization. As early as the 7th century, Prince Shunoko taught us harmony should be valued above all, and discord should be avoided. At the same time, he also reminded us every person has a heart, and every heart has its own views. In other words, diversity of thought is cultural, and true harmony does not come from uniformity, but from respecting differences and seeking a balance. And harmony in its true sense does not mean silence or compromise at any cost. We must have the courage to recognize what is right and call out what is wrong. This spirit, to harmonize differences, to respect each other, and to uphold fairness and integrity, resonates strongly with the ideas of love, creativity, and nobility. For this reason, I believe Japan can and should become an important home for the annual activities of the AIWS Lumina. I will be very glad to support the organization of AIWS Lumina annual events in Japan, in close connection with Boston, helping to build a living bridge between Japan and the United States. And beyond that, a bridge of trust, culture, and shared human values for the world. Let us work together to ensure that the AI age will not only be more advanced, but also more trusted. Not only more intelligent, but also more humane. Not only more powerful, but also more noble. Thank you very much. The words of Mr. Nakayama.
Thank you so much, Ramo, for the great talk. And you can see we have a wonderful range people in Japan. In March 31 of March, I have changed to his speech at LDP South, and together with Nakayama. And we are great welcome and receive and awareness and support from LDP. Very, very much for our initiative. AIWS chart, infrastructure, and AIWS Lumina. So we are thankful for Nakayama, thankful for Japan, and we go and we invite you join with us on June 12. Syndrome Conference, a Boston Global Forum in Japan, and we will discuss and review how to make it happen. As I talked in the first part, our conference not only discussion about concept and principle, we will make it happen. And Japan is a very, very important country to make it happen. And they promise, and from LDP, special LDP Global South, will support and work with us in AIWS chat infrastructure. So thank you so much. And now we continue with Vietnam. Vietnam is a very significant country in ASEAN. And Vietnam report, they have great success in nearly 20 years. Next year, they will, together with Boston Global Forum, other AIO Society. AIO Society next year, 10 years. Vietnam report next year, the 20th year. They work and get support from Harvard Business School from 2007. And there are a lot of our thinkers and intellectual and distinguished people, professors from Harvard, MIT, join and support for Vietnam report. And now Vietnam report join and support for our special initiative and make it happen in ASEAN. So please present video of Vietnam report.
America and 250 Conference, Vietnam Report warmly and respectfully congratulates the United States on the occasion of its 250th anniversary. This is a great historic milestone of freedom, of creativity, and of the aspiration to help lead the world forward. We also warmly welcome the book America at 250, A Beacon for the AI Age, co-authored by Governor Michael S. Dukakis and Nguyen An Tuan. This is a work of profound significance. It honors America's 250-year journey, and it opens a vision for the future as humanity enters the AI age with trust, responsibility, and noble human values. Vietnam Report respectfully welcomes the America at 250 Conference, a distinguished gathering of leaders, scholars, innovators, and pioneers of a new era. We also respectfully congratulate the leaders of America and the American people on being honored with the World Leader for Peace and Security Award. At the same time, we congratulate America 250, AI pioneers, the outstanding pioneers whose vision, research, invention, and leadership are helping shape the age of artificial intelligence. Vietnam Report is honored and proud to work together with BGF and MDI to help implement the AIWS trust infrastructure. We are committed to following the AIWS trust standards and to contributing practical tools and dashboards for measuring, evaluating, and advancing trust in the AI age. Vietnam Report is also honored to accompany BGF and AIWS in advancing AIWS Lumina, a global cultural architecture for the AI age, grounded in love, creativity, and nobility. We believe that the AI age must be guided not only by intelligence and innovation, but also by culture, inspiration, and noble values that illuminate the human spirit. Vietnam Report will also work together with Mr. Yasuhide Nakayama, Japan Diet member and Director of Global South of the LD, to gradually implement the AIWS trust infrastructure in Vietnam, Japan, and ASEAN, helping to build a trusted and sustainable space for regional cooperation as Vietnam Report moves toward its 20 glorious years in 2020. MDI, AIWS, and Boston, helping to advance AIWS trust infrastructure and AIWS Lumina as a beacon of trust, culture, and humanity for the AI age.
And now I would like to invite my dear friend, Vidya and Tolan. So we don't have so much time, so please 5 minutes here.
The music you heard in some of the videos goes back to a very good friend of mine called Ludwig van Beethoven. And Ludwig is the icon of a person who knows about standards, but breaking standards when you need to break them. The Ninth Symphony, which was the base of what you heard in the video, is the best masterpiece of understanding standards, using standards, but then coming up with a new idea and making it work. When Tuan asked me to give more insights about our work on trust, I'd love to come because in Media Tenor, when we started directly after the wall came down, dividing East and West Europe for more than 40 years, nobody had the impression that this could ever happen. My father told me, don't even think about going there, it will stay forever. The night the wall came down, guess where I was? In East Berlin. Guess what they played a few days later? The Ninth Symphony. Helmut Kohl and the German version of Gallup, Elisabeth Müller-Neumann, were convinced that media had an influence on not only how people think and feel, but as well how they act. Elizabeth and Wolfgang Lohnsbach were triggered by Tom Patterson's book, Out of Order, and I myself was even more impressed by The Vanishing Voter. I was asked to find a way how this could be turned into actionable research, as my father, editor-in-chief of a regional newspaper, had written his habilitation on how media manipulate. To cut a 35-year story short, Media Tenor created standards measuring not only media excellence, but providing data illustrating the risk caused by journalists who had lost path and tend to forget what Walter Lippmann defined as our job. 35 years later, we created an insurance run by Allianz on a global scale under the name Reputation Protect, which insures companies against media damage. Who would have thought that? Just as we speak, we can celebrate first successes at Supreme Courts in Germany, defining journalist standards, which forces the German version of BBC to find a way back to what Marvin and Bernard Kalb would call news are about facts, not opinion. How does Lumina and trust infrastructure play into this experience? Those who think journalists and publishers are the toughest professionals to deal with when it comes to setting standards and implement regulation have not yet met the IT sector. And with this group, the gods of IT, the AI maestros. We, not only the media, but most likely all of us, treated the IT windows, the IT weirdos 50 years ago with everything but respect. They acted like nerds, behaved like nerds, and were proud being nerds. I can remember the one, max two, youngsters who decided to be delighted by Atari. I don't know if anybody remembers this version of computer. And languages like Pascal or COBOL. They were not showing off with their little but cool French vocabulary like we did. They were not the adored captains of school sport teams and wearing suitcases they got from their bossy fathers. They were living in the dungeon, in the cellar, drank Coke and ate chips, and played these strange games, which none of us were playing. 20 years later, I saw some of them in Davos at the World Economic Forum. Meanwhile, their hair a bit shorter, but with the same let us alone attitude. Their names would be Sergey Brin and Larry Page. Back in 2004, the heroes were still rather Jamie Dimon, back then fresh at the top of his bank, JP Morgan, while the legends of General Motors or Ford were no longer invited. When we had the impression a group needed regulations, they could no longer be ignored. That was the finance sector. Nobody thought about the IT sector. We created together with Kofi Annan the Trust Meltdown report. Every year in Davos, we published the results, how the finance and insurance sector lost it. There were headlines like, the banks would love to have the reputation of the tobacco industry 20 years ago. Now, we are here in Boston and we take a step towards the AI, towards IT, trying to find a way, motivate and convince that it is all about standards, it's all about trust. And I'm very much looking forward trying to contribute a little bit in order to come up with something which would be something like a trust index into this sector, where we can ask the young ones as well as the professionals, can they be trusted? Can we be trusted? And how can we work together in future under the leadership of Tuan and Michael Dukakis and the Boston Global Forum? Thank you so much.
Roland speech not only great content, but great on time. Thank you so much, Roland. So we would like to invite chairman of the Đất Xanh Group from Vietnam. He will contribute not only as a business leader in Vietnam, but also contribute for intellectual and knowledge and work with the West infrastructure. Please.
Thank you for the introduction. Honorable Governor Michael Dukakis, Mr. Edward, distinguished guests and local leaders. It's a profound honor to stand here today as we look toward the history of 250th anniversary of the United States. We are gathered not just to discuss a new era, but to form a powerful commitment to action through the landmark book America 250, a beacon for AI age. I vividly recall the pivotal insight shared during the Roundtable for AI Development Strategy for Vietnam, organized by Boston Global Forum in London on October 28 last year. At that high-level forum, General Secretary and President Tholam, alongside senior Vietnamese leaders, expressed a deep passion and a clear vision for Vietnam's growth in the global AI economy. It was a call to action rooted in technological advancement, trust, and humanity. I have had a privilege of personally accompanying Governor Michael Dukakis and Mr. Nguyen throughout the journeys of this book. For the same group and myself, this is not only a theoretical publication, it's a blueprint for the future. Our company established in 2003, and we are now one of Vietnam's leading integrated real estate growth. Public listed in the Ho Chi Minh Stock Exchange with total asset about 1.2 billion US dollar. The group operates across 4 business areas: investment, development, asset management, and real estate services. Serving more than 7.5 million customers nationwide throughout the network of over 100 branches and team of more than 4,500 dedicated professionals. Driven by the strong commitment to sustainable and responsible growth, the same group works to create lasting value for its customer, partner, shareholder, and the wider community itself. Today, on behalf of the same group, I certainly pledge we will exert our utmost effort to transform the ideas and solutions within this book into realities. Specifically, we are committing our resources to support the development of AIWS trust infrastructure. We view this as essential foundation to realign the strategic vision of President Tholam and the Vietnamese government, creating a safe, secure, and trustworthy AI environment for citizens and business. Supporting the America at 250 initiative is a source of great pride for us. The Seng is committed to being a pioneer, bringing these noble values from a printed page into practice, and further strengthening the intellectual, the strategic partnership between Vietnam and United States. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Luke, for the great enthusiasm and speech. And now we would like to introduce special video present from Spirit of Vietnam. They invent solar tea, special culture, and dedicated to contribute for culture of AIWS Lumina, as we announced. They make very special for health, and that's the name essence of tea. They make from, you see in video, I don't want to say more, but very special and healthy and great spirit. So please present.
Age of artificial intelligence. As the world moves faster than ever, people need moments to slow down, nourish the spirit, and preserve the noble values of the human heart. Mukdan Tea Essence contributes to building tea soul culture for the AI age, accompanying the effort to shape AIWS trust infrastructure and AIWS trust architecture for a more trustworthy future for humanity. Mukdan Tea Essence proudly celebrates the 250th anniversary of the United States and honors the noble contributions of AIWS in shaping a more trustworthy, humane, and enlightened future for humanity in the AI age. Tea-Soul begins with a symbolic act, holding Mukden tea essence in quiet reflection. Refined from natural ancient Shan Tuyet tea trees, ranging from 400 years to over 1,000 years old, grown at altitudes of up to 1,500 meters in Vietnam. Mukden tea essence carries within it the essence of nature, time, and cultural depth. In that moment, the taste of tea leads people into inner depth, inviting reflection on noble values and on the path that AOs has opened and continues to build together. Mukden tea essence brings a sense of warmth and relaxation, helps calm the mind, supports concentration, and nurtures a state of peace and clarity. In that stillness, people can more deeply feel gratitude, compassion, and the source of creative energy from within. Mukden tea essence is also proud to accompany the book America at 250, a beacon for the AI age, a work devoted to visions, strategy, and solutions for building a better, more trustworthy, and more humane future in the AI age. Together with the noble values of AI Nux Lumina, Mukden tea essence helps nurture the spirit and the beauty of the human heart. Tea-Soul helps bring happiness to humanity, opening a path, nourishing the spirit, and uplifting beautiful hearts.
Thank you so much for Mukden tea. And we are now very honored to introduce Patterson, student from my hometown, Yaichan. She can here bring special from Yaichan, my hometown, to Boston. Yeah, please.
So, hello everyone. My name is Rosie. In case you don't know who I am, I'm an intern at Boston Global Forum, and I come from Vietnam, Nha Trang, same city as Tuan. And I'm really honored to speak today and also present the upcoming video on behalf of Boston Global Forum. And yeah, so as you will see in the video, there's a very prominent feature is the yellow mai, which is the yellow apricot flower. And it was Tuan's idea to have that feature to represent the dedicated love of the Vietnamese people, especially us from Nha Trang, to the United States to celebrate this 250 milestone anniversary of the America. Yeah, so please enjoy the video.
Spring 1995. Nha Trang, the beautiful coastal city, is preparing to witness a moment of transformation, a moment when its own yellow mai burst into bloom. Inside, Nguyen An Tuan and a team of young engineers from Can Hoa Post Office were building Vietnam's first information highway, Vietnet, the country's first TCP/IP internet network. And beside them, the yellow mai, in its warmth, renewal, and quiet nobility, inspired Nguyen An Tuan to imagine a new path of connection for Vietnam. That same year, Vietnam and the United States normalized relations. The yellow mai blossomed, and a nation opened herself to the great sea beyond. Years earlier, a young US Army lieutenant stationed in Nha Trang had come to cherish those very blossoms. He would become Professor Thomas Patterson of Harvard and return to Nha Trang, not as an officer, but as a friend through the Boston Global Forum. April 2013. Governor Michael Dukakis came to Nha Trang. On that same shore, he and Nguyen An Tuan shaped the vision and strategic direction of the Boston Global Forum, and later, the AI world's and later, the AI world And Vint Cerf, father of the internet and a dear friend of Nguyen Antoine, helped carry that vision beyond borders, into the architecture of a connected world, where technology is not just powerful, but purposeful. 30 springs later, beside the yellow my blossoms of TET 2025 and TET 2026 at Aiboa's house in Nha Trang, Nguyen Antoine found new inspiration for the ideas of AO's trust architecture, AO's trust infrastructure, and AIO's trust order. There, these visions took shape in writing and became among the special trust chapters of the book America at 250, a beacon for the AI age. Today, 250 yellow my trees of Nha Trang stand in honor of America in her 250th year and in tribute to the AI World Society. Yellow my carries the values upon which AWS is built: warmth, trust, renewal, wisdom, and a heart drawn toward what is noble. AOS Lumina, a global cultural architecture for the AI age.
Yes. I'm so moved to remarkable and historical moment. My hometown came here, and also now I have two hometowns, Nha Trang and Boston. My both very dear city and very, very deep involved in my life. And now is the time to conclude. All of us from Boston Global Forum, we are very honored to welcome you here. And everything we talk already, we don't want to remind. We only want thing that it make it happen. And from America at 250, we promise and dedicate to the West by action, by implement, by work to make our great ideas, great initiative, great plans from our AI pioneers or AI WS and BCF board members. Together with you, all of us today, we start and as we Governor Michael Lukakis and us talk already and write already, so we call for all of us start to work together, and we will very, very soon to reach out, connect with you to work together and with our partner in Japan, LDP Global South, and Vietnam, in Europe, and India also, Jammu from India, and we have many partners in India to work together. We glory road to make our initiative happen and realized. So thank you so much. And so we start and we continue for lunch at another discussion about film. We have two very distinguished people from Hollywood can here with us, with Jason Carter for lunch and discussion more. Maybe all of us we can do Hollywood with our work in the future. And thank you so much. Thank you so much for all our staff, Natalie, Ngọc, Hoa, and every people here today to make our event brilliant. And we honor to thank for our board members and our distinguished people and our fans here. Thank you so much. And we are honored to work with you for now for great and beautiful road ahead. Thank you so much, and hope to see you work with us. Start at a conference in Japan, June 12, Shinzo Abe, and we will work with leader of Japan, Boston Global Forum, have great fan at Prime Minister Sana Takaichi from 2023. So now she became Prime Minister and close friendship, close partner, and work with us, and Japan, very important partner for our road. Thank you so much. So we have lunch at Harvard Parking Club. Yep. Now we move to Harvard Parking Club for lunch.
I read about it.
Okay.
I'm not sure that's, because the Weizsäcker Institute in Berlin is more about sort of, social, I get a lot of different groups. But of course, I'm thinking what I think about the regulation. Let's think about that, you know, inside like the EU sort of stuff. Anyway.
We get a call? Are you scheduled?
Have it very much. I don't,
Việt Nam ơi, bây giờ em giúp anh một việc.